Okay, so for anybody brand new to these sessions, we usually use the syndicated deal analyzer for the underwriting. And with with the syndicated deal analyzer, a quick overview. So anything in blue is designed to be edited. Anything in black has a formula edit. So while you could manually override it, I wouldn't recommend it. Oftentimes what happens is you may change something on a different worksheet that's linked to it without even realizing it. So the moral of the story is if you're new, stick with blue. Okay, so we're going to dive into today's deal. It's a 133 unit deal in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is part of the Triad. And for anybody who's been on a few of these sessions, what's the difference in timing that we look at the income versus the expenses from? And why do we do it?
So the income's in a T3 with annualized, and the expenses are T12, and the reason to do it because the way the lenders are going to look at the
Right, very good. Yep. So keep in mind, guys, you always want to make sure that you're looking at deals through the same lens that lenders are going to look at them from. That's going to be very important. Okay, so what we'll do here is we'll dive into our T12. So for each of our income items, to Jeff's point, we're going to take the last 3 months, which is February, March, and April, in this case, columns K, L, and M. We're going to do a subtotal with those three. And what we'll do is we'll multiply that subtotal by 4 so we can annualize it. Does everybody understand why we're multiplying that subtotal by 4? Okay, so then what we'll do is we'll take that formula, we'll just extrapolate it down for all the income items. So on the syndicated deal analyzer, the income items that we're looking for right now are gross potential rent, vacancy, concessions, loss to lease, bad debt, and other income. So as we look for gross potential rent, which item or items from the T12 are going to fall into that?
Market rent.
What's that, Jason?
Market rent.
Right, very good. Okay, so we're going to take market rent, guys, which is row 14, and that's 1,490,104.
Hey, Charles, I have a quick question. I'm underwriting a deal right now, and there is a adjustment from accrual to cash in the income. Do you include that in the gross potential rent also? And the last question is, what do you do with that? Because it makes sure gross rent average higher than the average rent in your rent roll.
So the answer is I'd have to see where it's positioned on the financials, but from a high level thought, I would say I'd probably put in concessions, loss to lease, bad debt. You would definitely want to account for it somewhere, but my gut feeling would say probably in that, but we'd have to see where it's positioned on the financials.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so who wants to explain the difference between physical vacancy and economic vacancy? Anybody want to offer any insight on that?
I'll do it, Charles.
Go for it, Jason.
Physical vacancy is like actual bodies inside the units, and the economic vacancy is bodies, but they're not paying.
Right, that's definitely a good way to sum it up. So keep in mind, guys, an economic vacancy could also be units that are permanently offline. They could be units that are down units that are going to take more than just a standard turn to get them restored to rent ready condition. It could be any type of discount or concession you see, and those are all different forms. I see we have a question in the chat box as well from Diego, and he's asking what would cause a gain to lease. So a gain to lease is when your effective rent is greater than your market rent. So essentially the rents that you're actually signing leases for are higher than what you're marketing them for. Okay, so for physical vacancy, when we look at the financials here, which item or items are going to fall into physical vacancy?
Line 16.
16, very good, Annie. Yep. Okay, so our total there is 277,063 and 96 cents. Okay, so we have a total just north of 18.5% there. So then for our concessions, loss to lease, bad debt, which is all of our economic vacancy, which item or items are going to fall into that?
73.
You said row 20, Jeff?
How about line 18?
Yep, line 18. Yep, any others?
Concessions, maybe?
Yep.
Line 19?
Good.
21.
Any others? 21, good. Any more still? So 3 more that would fall into that as
I
well.
would say 323.
So 23 is kind of an
Would you
interesting
go
one.
with
It's tough to
323?
tell exactly what that is. You know, I think we're
Yeah.
actually gonna wind up adding that to the gross potential rent. But I would also say line 13, so that's your gain or loss to lease, that's gonna fall into it. Line 17, the model units, and line 22 as well. So let's add this $2,700 for row 23 to our gross potential rent. It's unclear exactly what that is from looking at the financials. So we're just going to use our best judgment on that and put it in there at this time. And then we'll take our other items here from row 13 down to row 22, and this will be our economic vacancy. That's 420, 060, and 56 cents. So what I see right away between these two items is we have north of 46% vacancy.
Charles, I
Yes.
think line 23 captured line 22 in that subtotal.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, theoretically, it could be from the name of the account. It's tough to say.
Sorry, I mean, on this spreadsheet, I think we're double counting vacancy when we're doing the subtotal.
When you're talking about down here, or which subtotal you're referring to?
For the economic vacancy, I think it's 13 and then 17 through 22.
Right, that you're absolutely right. I'm sorry about that. That's correct. Good point. Okay, so our total there is actually 140, 296 and 60 cents. Good catch on that, Bessie. Okay, so our total vacancy was still north of 28, it was just right around 28%. What do you guys think of that?
That's pretty high.
It is. Could there potentially be an opportunity there?
Yes, it could be.
Could it also be a liability?
Yes, it could also be
Yeah,
that.
it could be.
Right. So it's important to understand, and we'll have to look into it a little bit further to determine which it actually is. So what is other income?
Anything over and above rent.
Right. So in this case here, it's going to be everything from row 27 down to row 45, and that's going to be our other income. Okay, so our total there is 124, 487.72. Okay, so we want to make sure our numbers prove out. So let's take a peek at our effective gross income here. It's 1,199,931. Let's see if that matches up to what we show on the T12. So we have here 1,197,231. So it looks like we're a little bit off, not terribly far, but there's something that's obviously missing here. So we'll take a quick minute to figure that out. And it might just be something as simple as typing wrong, which I believe is what happened here. Let's see. Okay, so now our numbers should prove out. So we have 1,197,231, and that matches exactly what we have on the T12. So now we're in good shape. Okay, so on the income side, on the expense side, items we have here are advertising, contract services, gas and electric, general admin, insurance, legal, real estate taxes, trash removal, management fee, payroll, repairs and maintenance, turnover, and water sewer. So everything we see on the T12 is going to fall into one of these categories. Okay, so the first one we have is repairs and maintenance. Is there anything here in the repair and maintenance section that we might want to break out, or do you think everything's repair and maintenance?
Maybe take out the trash, the garbage removal and
Yep.
put it for trash and the landscape under the contract services.
Yep, very good. So we'll take those out. So the two items that are garbage removal, we'll put these in the garbage removal section. And then we'll see, you mentioned landscaping, so I agree, we'll also take that one out. I would also say let's take the exterminating out. So we'll put both exterminating and landscaping in our contract services, because those are your most consistent contract services. Keep in mind, guys, the contract service is anything that's recurring, typically in frequency and cost. Landscaping and extermination are most times your most common ones you're going to have. And then there's also two items here specifically labeled as make ready. So I'm going to take these out as well. And our total there is 15,409.17. And we'll plug that into our turnover expense. Okay, so then the rest of these items here we'll leave in our repair and maintenance total. And that total is going to be $9,098.16. Okay, so next thing we have is salaries. Do you guys agree that these are all payroll expenses?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, I would agree with that too. So our total number is 142,681.08. Okay, so next thing we have is utility. So the syndicated deal analyzer being they have separate line items. We'll do our first three items for electric and gas. And that's $13,256.01. Then our next one is water for the common area. And that's $3,775.60. And then our next one's cable and internet access, which we'll put in general admin. So at that amount, it's probably just something that they're using for the leasing office. So we'll throw it in there. Okay, so leasing and marketing. Do you guys agree that these are all leasing and marketing items?
Yeah, I do.
Yep, same here. So we'll take our total number, which is $42,550.93. And that'll become our advertising expense. Okay, administrative. Is there anything here that you guys might break out?
Legal,
Right, that will definitely break out. Good job, Bessie. And the others? So the other one I would also do is eviction fee. So we'll put that and legal both in our legal expense, and that's $22,829. Now, what do you guys notice about our legal expense, in particular the eviction fees?
Legal fees are pretty cheap
Anybody?
grow,
without the eviction fees. Without the eviction fees.
Does anybody have a different thought on that?
they seem to be growing in the last few months as well.
They do. What I would say is that in general, $22,000 a year for 133 unit property, probably a pretty high expense, I would say. So again, that could be a problem or it could be an opportunity, something we'll need to study a little bit further. So the rest of these items related to our general admin expense, that's $17,410.81.
Where do you want to be sort of on the eviction fee as an average, Charles?
So,
Is there a percentage general rule?
not really. I mean, you probably want to be 50 to $100, and truthfully more on the $50 side, I think, per unit once you get the property stabilized. So for a lot of tools, you're going to wind up including it with the general admin expense. But I think once you stabilize, if you're spending more than 50, maybe $75 a unit, you're probably too high.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the management fee we'll put into the management fee category. That's $31,622.75. And then we have insurance. So our total there is $42,132. Give me have a question.
Yes, Charles, for the turnover evictions, could it be maybe the current owner bought it and then is turning units and upgrading them, increasing rates, and so then those that cannot afford it are being forced out? So
Yes.
that's a good thing, possibly.
It definitely could be. So the answer is, until we really get some clarity from the broker on it, we're just going to be speculating. But there's a definite possibility that could very well be the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So our real property tax is $82,884, and we'll plug that into our tax number. So same way we did on the income, we want to make sure that our expense numbers prove out. We're at $463,723. And that matches up to what we have on the T12. So we're in good shape with our expenses. Okay, so now next thing we'll do is we'll dive into the OM and we'll go through that. So does anybody here look in the Greensboro market or in the Southeast? You're going to take that as a no. So I was trying to see if anybody noticed anything about the expenses here, but in general, this particular property seems to be running pretty low in expenses, which in one way could be a good thing because obviously maybe it's lean and more efficient, so that could be a plus. It may also mean there's things that aren't getting done, so it can go any number of different ways. So again, something we need to further investigate and just understand what we're getting. So what are we looking for as we go through the OM? Anybody have a thought? We got a quiet crowd today.
Well, job growth, average salary, the economics of the area.
Yeah, so it's definitely good to understand those things for sure. And keep in mind when you go through the OM, what you want to do is get some information about both the property and the area. And you want to get some things that you can follow up on with the broker about. So when you look at a deal, the most important thing you need to do is get back to the broker, get back to the seller. This is very much a relationship business, and you need to get in the habit of talking to people and asking them questions and giving them feedback. So, what I see right away as we look at the cover photo is aesthetically, it's not a bad looking property. Yeah, the shutters and the doors seem like they've recently been painted, so I think those are good things that add some curb appeal to the property, so that's a plus. We get some information on the sales team that's running the process. That's a good thing. We get some information about the specs of the property, and we can see it's built in the early 70s. And the executive summary, they're telling us that the Cushman & Wakefield Sunbelt Multifamily Advisory Group is pleased to present the exclusive listing of the Heights, a 133-unit apartment community located in Greensboro, North Carolina. This asset is situated in the thriving submarket of West Greensboro, built in 1972 and 74. The Heights offers an outstanding opportunity to invest in a proven value-add opportunity. With 93 of the units renovated and over $1.5 million in capital expenditures, new ownership will be able to devote their efforts to continue the value-add program. The property is located just 2 miles away from the urban loop, a 6-lane freeway carrying Interstate 73, 85, 841, and 421. This interstate will provide critical links to high-growth areas around West Greensboro. So, Kim, to your question, it does seem like the seller has certainly upgraded a good amount of the units. This property is 133 units, and they've upgraded 93 of them. So they've done a lot of the heavy lifting, and I think that's, to me personally, that's actually something I like. So I'm glad to see that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And of the different highlights we have, we can see there's quite a few about the area. And the area obviously very important. Not something we're going to spend a ton of time on during these sessions here. We usually focus more on the things that are related to the property itself, but obviously something that you want to look at. And I would recommend really selecting the area before you start looking for deals, because that's going to be far more important. So this particular property is in a pretty good submarket in the Greensboro area. And, they're selling that a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. So now we'll kind of dive into the OM and see what else we find out here. So they're showing us already that, the seller's been upgrading some units, and it looks like they're getting $200 premiums. And right now they're saying it looks like that $6,500 cost per unit is kind of the budget number for what's there to do still. So they're showing us where the seller has spent that $1.5 million, and that's been spent over the last 3 years, it tells us. Looks like they've done extensive HVAC and plumbing work, so those can definitely be good things as well. Some of these categories are pretty vague, so you're not going to get a ton from this, but it's good to understand where that money was spent, because it may let you know what problem areas you'll have going forward. More information about the market and the sub-market, again, very important, but not something that we're going to focus on too much during these sessions. West Greensboro, for anybody unfamiliar with the Greensboro market, is definitely one of the more thriving sections, and it's an area that has a lot of demand, both from investors and from tenants. And that's really what they're selling this deal on, is the area and the desirability of it, and why tenants are going to want to keep coming there, and why investors would want to ultimately buy there. Okay, so we have some more specs about the construction of the property. 13 residential buildings and leasing office, wood frame buildings. So far, all of these are fairly standard, nothing too out of the ordinary. So basic information about life safety systems and any of the other important pieces that we may need. So we get some photographs of the property, and typical with many early 70s properties, you don't see a ton of amenities, not necessarily a bad thing, but just the reality of, times back then. You can see that they do have, a nice outdoor area. So I guess this is some type of, picnic area with a grilling station. So you can go there, and it looks like they have 2 separate grills, which is a plus. Mail kiosk, very basic on the amenities. And then it looks like they also do have a dog park and a playground. And the unit interiors, we can see some photographs here. It looks like these are probably some of the units that were upgraded. You can see the black appliances, the newer flooring. I would say cabinetry, but that would be a lie. I mean, there's a little bit of cabinetry, but mostly shelving. So certainly not much of cabinetry. So you're probably not going to attract as many families there for stuff like that. But, for a single working person, it might be a good fit. So we can see that all the units here are 2-bedroom, 1-baths. And it looks like of them, 120 of those units are actually townhomes. So they have 13 that are just garden style, it appears. But overall, people like townhomes. They are very in demand. One thing that's probably not as competitive is that they're all 2-bedroom, 1-bath. but all 133 units are 2-1s, and that's something we want to make note of in our target rent analysis here. Oops. So keep in mind, guys, this target rent analysis doesn't necessarily do anything for you in the underwriting, but it's good to have at a glance. So you can get a quick snapshot of where the property is with the starting and ending rents, and also with the unit mix by filling that in. And then we have a site map showing us the layout of the property. Looks like there's a fair amount of greenery throughout the property, so that's something that's definitely very desirable for a lot of people. And you can see the layout of the 13 buildings they have. So some information about the market, which we're not going to spend a ton of time on during these sessions, but again, very important and something you want to know if you're actually looking for deals there. And we can see some rent comps. So this is something we'll come back to in a few minutes as we see, excuse me, as we see where we think we can push rents at this property. We'll just gloss over that for right now. Now, keep in mind, if you don't have a management company and you're looking at a particular area, some of the OMs will tell you who's managing the comp properties. So you probably want to reach out to the companies that you see listed that are managing a lot of properties in the area, because if they're managing some of the comps, they might be able to give you good information. And they might be a management company that you want to consider using yourself if you don't already have. Okay, so we get some information here on the property itself. What they're showing us is, where they believe rents can be pushed. And they also give us some information here about the CapEx. Typically, they usually give an actual CapEx budget, but I could be missing it, but I'm not seeing it here in the OM. So it looks like in the little note they have here in the comment section, they are showing that, let's see. So they're showing the buyer's going to complete the renovation program. And they're giving some information we can use to put together our budget here. So it's saying the average monthly rental premiums of $125 upon completion of renovations represents the average being achieved by year 4. And the cost to complete the renovations is $6,500. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that we only have to upgrade 40 of the units, with the assumption that 93 were done by the seller. And we're going to use that $6,500 budget as a starting point, because that's really the best thing we have. Now, do you think a property from the early 70s might also have some deferred maintenance?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yep, it's kind of my thinking as well. Let's put a buffer in there, because you always want to have some money for exterior improvements and for deferred maintenance. And just given the size and the age of the property, I'm going to say maybe 500,000. I might even up it a little more to 750, just because I really like the total budget to be closer to $1 million. So it may not seem like it, but $1 million can go very quickly on a property this size, and you'd be surprised how little that gets you nowadays. So just
Charles?
Yes, Tim.
Does the $1 million, like include parking lot, like whatever asphalt, roofs also?
Right. So it can definitely include those things. So from a high level, just looking at the photographs here, I mean, it does look like there's some cracks in the parking lot. So there's a good chance we'll probably need to seal and stripe it at the very least throughout our ownership at some point. And, the hope would be that we won't need to replace all the roofs, but we may need to replace at least some of them, I'd imagine, throughout our whole period. So yeah, for that buffer, we definitely include those things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, then we have the broker's pro forma. So while I don't necessarily use their pro forma as gospel, there are things that I like to look at, and I like to see particularly what changes they're showing that differ significantly from what the actual financials are. And the reason I like to do that is because those are questions I go back and I ask them, and it gives me some insight. So it'll help me understand the deal better, and it helps give you better information if you're questioning things that maybe they know something about the deal that we don't. So we want to understand what they know, so it can help us make a better informed investing decision. Okay, so let's play with the pro forma a bit. Do you guys want to go through the numbers, and we'll kind of see where we think things shake out here?
Yes.
Okay, so let's come back to our comps. We'll do that first. And I don't really know where the pricing guidance is on this deal just yet, but I'm going to guess and say that it's, let's just say maybe 125,000 a door as an arbitrary number, and just being somewhat familiar with the market there. So we'll kind of use that as our starting point. And in terms of the debt, let's assume that we're going with agency debt. For anybody who's been looking in the market recently, what types of LTVs or what types of down payments are you seeing?
40.
Okay.
35.
Yeah. I would say, Ian, you're pretty close. I'd actually go with Jason, even be a little more conservative. So I'd go 45% on the down payment percentage with a 55% LTV, just because until we actually have a term sheet in our hands, leverage right now on the agency loans are still generally pretty low because pricing really needs to come down and reset more still.
Okay.
Okay, so then for everybody who's looking at agency, what type of interest only are you seeing?
It depends. Like I've seen some brokers tell me they can only give me 12 months. And then I've seen some tell me they can give me 60 months. So
Yeah, I've definitely seen them vary too. Generally on the conventional agency loans, I haven't seen anything less than 3 years. So let's go with that for now. 12 months, I really haven't seen that on any of the agency loans recently, but if you're using like bank debt and things like that, I've certainly seen it. If you're looking at the small balance loans on the agency side, then I've seen 24 months quite a few times. So keep in mind, guys, the amount of interest only you get will also be determined based on the type of loan product you're using and based on the size of the deal as well. So the size of the deal and the attractiveness of the deal is going to all weigh into that, and the length of the term. So if you're going with a 5-year term, you're going to have less interest only. I generally look for a 10 or a 12-year term. So usually you'll see at least 3 years on those right now. So then on the interest rates, what are you guys seeing for interest rates on the agency loans recently? Who here is actively looking at deals? What type of rates are you seeing, guys?
So I'm seeing a 5 1/4, 5 3/4.
yeah, 5.75.
Yeah, 5.75 is a good one. I think that even builds a little bit of a cushion. I think for the conventional loans, I think if you go anywhere between like 5.4 and 5.6, you'd probably be okay. For the small balance loans, I think maybe if you go about 20 basis points higher than that, you're good. But 5.75 will give us a little cushion just in case we have another rate hike in the middle. So amortization period, what are you guys seeing on the agency loans for those recently?
30, right, Charles?
Yeah, most times. Recently, I've been seeing a lot with 35. Keep in mind, the agencies do offer 35-year amortization periods now. Those aren't as typical, so they usually do require an approval on a case-by-case basis. So I'd recommend underwriting with the 30. If you get 35, even better. Okay, so then on the operating reserves, the last couple of months, I've been recommending to use 8 months of your pro forma expenses. So I'm gonna do exactly that. That we always have money in there. And now let's go through our rent stack and we'll see where we think targets can go here. So geographically, which ones do you think are the best comps?
I say 2, 5, and 6.
Yeah, and I would actually say 4 as well. I think all of them are probably pretty good. Now, when we go a step further, aside from just geography, are there any that maybe would make less relevant?
4 and 5 due to the age.
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm thinking too. So 98 is definitely a newer vintage. It's going to be a better quality asset. Even for 88, I mean, that's kind of on the older side at this point. So I'm not as concerned with that. But the two from number 4 and number 5 that Bessie pointed out, I agree with. So when we're looking at the rent stack, the ones we really want to focus in on are number 2, which is Sedgefield Square, and also number 6, the residences at 1805. So those are probably our best comps are the ones that we have here. And what we can see here on the rent stack is where the subject property stacks up. So we can see that Sedgefield Square is at 1145. They have 2 1s. Their 2 1s are a little bit bigger. Now they're not townhomes, but they are garden style, but still have a little bit of a bigger floor plan. And then the residences at 1805, they're at 1104, but they're also a little bigger with the garden style unit. And it looks like they have another 2 1 unit that's 880 square feet at 1054, and a 2 1.5 at 1079. So where do you guys think we can bring these rents up to?
Maybe 1,050.
Kind of my thinking, Charles. That's actually the number I pretty much had in my head. So
Yeah, because it's a little smaller, that's why I knock it down just a little bit.
it's kind of what I'm thinking too. They are a little bit smaller, that's for sure. I think the townhomes are attractive, but I guess the downside is that even though they're townhomes, they're still smaller than some of the garden style units. So it's kind of what I'm thinking too. Let's go with that 1,050. I think that's probably a pretty good number. So being we have 133 units, but really only 40 of them to upgrade because the other 93 have already been upgraded. How long do you think it'll take us to implement this value add?
So you think you could do that in 12 months,
I do.
no more than.
Now, the question I would ask is, do we want to underwrite that for 1 year, or do we want to break it out and show it over 2?
I'd probably break it out to 2. And just
I know what I'm thinking
expect.
too, simply because sometimes just for investor optics, it helps. But, I do think we probably could do that in 12 months. So let's say if we go with 1,050, our target rent, and then we're subtracting our current average monthly rent at $935. That gives us a value add bump of $115. And if we divide that by 2, we'll assume that we're going to add $57.50 each year. So in scenario 4 in the scenarios tab, for year 1, we're going to put our year 1 value add bump, $57.50. We'll multiply that by the number of units at the property and multiply that by 12 months in a year. Then for the future year, for year 2, we're going to come to our P&L tab, and we're going to plug that into our average monthly rent. So we're going to leave the equation that's there. And then on top of that, we're going to add an additional $57.50 for our value add. Now, you might remember earlier on, I was saying that some of the expenses seem a little bit light. So they're currently running this property, at $3,700 a unit, which, in a smaller market, I think is definitely doable. But even in a market like Greensboro, I think it's probably going to be on the cheaper side. So I doubt that we're going to be able to run it that same way. So let's do a few things here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at the broker's pro forma for reference. And then the second thing we'll do here is just kind of piece together where we think the expenses might be. So let's look at some of the things they're showing. So on, on the, the advertising, let's start with that. So right now we're at $320 a door, which is probably a high number. The broker's showing $150 a door. What do you guys think? Do we want to drop it down that low?
I think so, at least lower. 320 seems a little bit high.
I would agree with that. So the $150 a door is probably more in line. Now, here's what I would say. I might leave it for year 1 because there's definitely an occupancy issue that we have to solve. But I would say maybe we can drop that in year 2, which I don't normally advocate changing for what's in black, but in this case, the only way you can do it in here is just manually changing it. So I'm going to come to the P&L, and then starting in year 2, I'm going to drop that to $150 a door. But for year 1, I'm still going to leave it higher because we're going to need some extra marketing to fill those vacant units. Okay, so the next thing we have contract services, which is really landscaping and extermination. They're showing $150 a door. They don't have anything for extermination, but we're at $128 a door. So I'm actually going to bump this to $200. I'm just going to do that from experience. So $200 a door seems to work fairly well for contract services in many parts of the Southeast. And that way it's something we can put there. The utilities are not going to change. Those we can leave the way they are. General admin, what do you guys think? Is that number low, high? Where do you guys think it should be? Right now we're at $132 a door.
I would probably leave it at 130. Maybe it's a little higher, but for now, probably just leave it as is.
So I'm actually going to recommend bumping this one a bit, just because the broker's at 313, which I feel like might be a bit high, but I think somewhere between 250 and 300 a door. Although with the way costs are rising now, I'd probably go 300 just to be safe. So then next thing we have here is insurance. Insurance we definitely want to raise. So by the broker's projection, they're showing here at $450 a door, which sounds great. But has anybody been seeing $450 a door recently on C properties? Anywhere?
Not in Florida. It's
Definitely not in Florida, yeah. In Florida, you can't even see that on A properties.
Yeah.
So let's go to ratemap.org. We'll kind of use that as a starting point. And another thing you could always do is just increase the number by 20 to 25% of where the seller is. That's probably a good starting point. But they're showing in the Southeast, 650 a door for the, and that's an average, guys. So, you know, A, B, and C's across the board. But I'm going to bump it up to 650 just because insurance premiums have been going pretty high as of late. Okay, so then we have legal. That number I'm going to leave the way it is, but the truth is I'd like to hope that number would drop quite a bit. So then the tax number. So this particular county reassessed last year. Let's see where their tax bills came in. So these are 2022. So I don't believe the assessment would actually, let me see if it would, maybe it would have fit here. Let's see. So it looks like on one, they paid $19,981. And the second one, they have $75,643. So roughly $95,000 together. And that kind of lines up with where the broker's at. So what we'll do is we'll leave that $95,625 there. But one of the items that I would follow up on in this deal is to see where the tax assessment is. So I believe the assessment has already come out. And we can use that in our calculation to come up with a more accurate projection going forward. So the next thing we have is management fee. What type of management fee do you think we'll see to manage 133 unit property?
Maxing out
Would it-
at 4% maybe?
It's about what I'm thinking also. Now, the one thing I would say is the income's a little weaker, so 4% is not really that much. But I think it's, you know, I think it's a good starting point, something we can definitely use. The payroll. What do you guys think about the payroll number? Okay, so the payroll I would say is quite low. For 1,073 a door, probably going to be very tough to run it at that level nowadays, unless you're really getting, bottom tier employees, for lack of a better term. Okay, so the broker's showing 178,750. I think that's definitely a much better number, and that could be a possibility. So I'd feel good with that number. We'll bump it up to that. Now, repairs and maintenance and turnover. Between both, we're at 184 a door. Who thinks that's a good number? Who thinks the seller might be capitalizing a lot? Who thinks the seller might not be fixing anything?
Yes.
Yeah, that seemed pretty low.
See, very low. So it would lead me to believe that they're either not fixing things or they're capitalizing as much as they can. So the broker's adjusting that number to 350 a door for repairs and maintenance and 250 for turnover. I would say those are pretty typical numbers for the market, so I'm actually going to use those same numbers myself. And you'll notice that, unfortunately, our expenses are a little bit higher than the numbers the seller had. Now, what I'll also do is I'll put the replacement reserve up to 300 a door, because being this is an older property, there's a good chance that's what the lender is going to want after they do their inspection. And we'll make sure to bump it up for that. So 5,347 a door, I would say that's probably a much more doable number for a C property in the Greensboro market that you're syndicating. So it's something we can feel a little bit better about. We have our debt information in, we have our income. Now, one thing we haven't done is adjust the vacancy. So we're right around 28% between physical and economic. Where do you guys think we might want to be in year one? Anybody have any thought?
What is the current occupancy now?
Good question, Jim. So how do we find that out?
Is
What's that?
it's 89.5%, I think it said in the
In the
OM.
OM, right? So now let's also look the rent roll. Now, granted, this is April 30th, so it's almost a month old, but it'll give us some good information, at least for right now. So what we're seeing here is that of the 133 units, it looks like they had 119 that are occupied. So that 89.5% is pretty valid as of the end of April. So what do you guys think is a realistic vacancy that we want to show? So I see Diego put in the chat box 12%. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would start, 15 is what I was thinking. It
What I'm
would,
thinking too, I think let's bump these numbers up a bit and let's leave 15 for now. And then by year two, I'll drop that down to 12. And that's where I'd really leave it for the rest of the deal, being this is a C property. Now, while we're on the P&L, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to drop the annual escalation to 0% for years 1 and 2, and then 3% year on, because we may have a point where we have some stagnation with rent growth, so we want to make sure we're accounting for that, aside from the value add bump. And the only thing we really haven't touched is terminal cap rate. So does anybody have a guess where we might, where we might want to be for a terminal cap rate for this market? Now, keep in mind, guys, cap rates are changing very rapidly. So they're going very fast at this point. And in most cases, they're going up, not down. So you want to be speaking with people on a regular basis, asking them what they're seeing in the market, asking where the cap rates are, so that way you understand. So even saying 6%, not a bad choice. I'm going to go a smidgen higher than that. I'll probably set this at 5.75, which will give us a 6.25 terminal cap. I might even raise that another 25 basis points, just because it's really going to depend on your perspective of the market and where you see things shaking out at this point. I'm probably a little more bearish than many, so because of that, I want to use higher terminal cap rates. And then we'll come over to our summary tab, and I would just adjust some of the settings that we would use here to our normal settings. And then let's play with the numbers a bit, and we'll see where it actually makes sense. So right now we have our value add in. We adjusted the terminal cap rate. We have pretty much all the information we have in. The only thing we need to put in is reserve money for our taxes and insurance, so that way we're not short at closing. So I'd recommend using 12 months of taxes and insurance. So we're going to put that in the acquisition cost tab, and that's going to be in the real estate taxes and insurance items. So we'll do that. And that's so you have enough money at closing to make sure you can fund any escrows that the lender might ask you for. So right now, does this deal look attractive to anybody?
No, not
No.
according to the numbers.
Nope.
Right. So do you guys want to play with the price, and we'll see where it might make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so let's do that. We're a pretty good bit off at this point, so I have a feeling that it's going to take quite a drop. Okay, so this is at 100,000 a door. We previously started at 125. Does it look a lot better?
Yeah.
Does it
Yeah.
get anybody excited yet?
No.
No, not really.
I would agree with that. So let's go a little bit further. We'll try 90 a door. How about now? Anybody excited yet?
No. But we're
There's
getting.
no ways to go.
Okay. Getting better though, right?
Yeah,
How about now? We there?
almost.
Yeah, getting better.
Are we close enough at this point that maybe it's just a matter of tweaking some numbers and seeing what we can do to be more competitive?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're somewhere in that 80 a door ballpark, I think you're probably in a good number here. What things could potentially allow us to go higher on price?
Vacancy, you can tweak that. You could tweak your cap rate a little tiny bit.
Right, that can definitely do it. Or
You could talk to your property manager, see if you could push up rent a little
Right.
bit.
so keep that in mind, guys. If you can increase rents further than we're anticipating, that could allow you to up your price. As Jason said, if you do tweak your terminal cap rate a bit, that could also allow you to do some more. So it really just depends on, little tweaks you can make that can put you right across the finish line. Why don't we open up for questions, either with this deal or underwriting of the market in general? Who's got questions?
I'm pretty sure that a lot of people have been seeing that article at time on the Wall Street Journal that's not painting syndicators in a positive light. And my approach is actually like pointing that out to my investors and then telling them, hey, here's the difference between us and them. And they tend to like that. And I was wondering if anybody else is facing similar objections, and how are they handling those objections right now?
Well, it's definitely a good discussion topic. Why don't we open it up? So the article is still fairly new. It came out this past Tuesday for anybody who's unaware of it, but I'm sure that it will certainly make it tougher to raise money straight across the board. So if anybody has any suggestions for how they're dealing with it, feel free to speak up and to offer your perspective and your insight.
Can you summarize the article's main point?
Yes, so it really centered around the gentleman that had the 4 foreclosed properties in the Houston area. But then it kind of went on to paint syndication as a whole in a very negative light. And the truth of it is, I kind of saw that coming. I think it was more a matter of when than if. But basically what it did was it more or less said that, the syndicators are putting in very little money, that oftentimes they're making big fees on the acquisition, and that oftentimes it's the investors at risk and it's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
Was the so this is Wall Street Journal where they're advocating then what stocks and bonds? I mean, how is this any different, right? I mean, with
Right.
the property, like at least cash flow is tax free. Like you have agency debt up to 80%. Like in a good market, there's leverage. I mean, you don't get any, like that, like buying stocks.
Yeah.
No, you're definitely right on that. I think there's going to be a lot of backlash on it. I mean, as that article disseminates to the masses, I think you have a lot of fear out there already in the market, and I think that's certainly going to create some more. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people that haven't had great experiences in syndication deals.
Yep.
For anybody who invested in deals from 2010 to 2020, they probably did pretty good. But for anybody who's invested in deals in the last, 1, 2, 3 years, they probably haven't had that same experience. And the way you're going to have to deal with it is probably just take each person's objections one by one, listen to what they're saying, and then talk through each of the points that they're giving you, so that way you can respond in kind.
Something as well that I point out is that there's always a couple rotten bad apples in every profession. For example, doctors. There's bad doctors as well. But does that mean that you're not gonna go into the hospital the next time that you get sick? No.
It's definitely a good question. I think everybody's going to have their own perspectives and their own opinions on it. And I think it's important to hear them out and to listen to what they have to say. And if there's any advantages you have over how you might be different from those rotten apples, then I think you do want to take the time to point those out and to let people know. But to some extent, I think you're going to have to get people comfortable dipping their toe back in the water, and that's going to take some time and some effort. And it may take seeing some of the hysteria die down before they really are ready to do that. You'll have some people that are going to continue investing regardless, and those are probably the ones you want to focus on first. But the ones who feel that they've been jaded and whether they've been burnt through a syndication deal, you may need to talk through some of that concern and to do that. I think everybody's going to have their own perspective and their own choice for investments. One of my former partners, he used to invest heavily in stocks, but then he lost a lot of money in 2008. So he's not invested in stocks since then. So in a case like that, if you find an investor who feels that way about syndication, you're probably wasting your time and your energy trying to convince them otherwise. So you want to be focusing on the people that are either continuing to invest or maybe that are on the fence, but there's a chance of having them invest again or for a first time, and working with those people to help them understand how it could benefit them.
And, this is the opportunity that we've been waiting for, just because I'm seeing that most people are not gonna persist through this, and then they're not gonna have money to actually fund the deals. So that's gonna be more opportunities for us who are actually in the market right now.
Right. So I wouldn't say that time is here yet, but I think it's definitely approaching. You know, I've been saying for a while, I mean, for everybody who's heard me on these sessions, I personally am quite bearish, and I think there's a lot more downward movement left. I don't think we're anywhere near the bottom. I think things are gonna get a lot worse, but I think that's also what's gonna create the opportunity. And it's not to say that I'm not buying because of that, but the key is to buy things with long-term fixed rate debt and to make sure you have enough time to ride out any down cycles.
Mm.
You know, so most deals that we're looking at aren't really penciling out, and I think that's the case for a lot of buyers at this point. There's pretty big disparities in most markets between buyers and sellers. And the deals that are getting done are probably either deals that involve loan assumptions, deals that have, you know, some type of creative finance, deals that have long-term owners with very good cost bases, or deals in distress with some type of necessity. So those are probably the deals you're seeing get done right now. And you'll probably see the transaction volume get lower throughout the year, at least the on-market stuff, but you'll probably see an increase in distressed properties near the end of the year and the early part of next year.
And another thing I noticed, Charles, is most people don't know that there's two kinds of commercial real estate. They don't know that there's office, there's multifamily, there's industrial. And when they hear the media talk about, you know, commercial as in retail, they think that all retail is all the same kind of commercial real estate.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, there's going to be pain, I think, in a lot of different sectors in the commercial real estate world. Multifamily, no exception. I think there's going to be a lot of pain in multifamily. But you know, there's opportunities, I think, in any one of them, right? So with any investment, what's going to help you have a successful investment? There's probably two things. The first is skill and expertise and knowledge, and just going out there and educating yourself and putting it in practice and learning. And the second is luck. So, you know, if you don't have the second, you better hope that you have the first. You know, so do what you can to become informed and to become educated, and then putting into practice as frequently as you can, so that way you can keep refining that skill. And that's going to be very important. So, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was joking around with some of my partners, and I said, you know, part of me says now's the time to go out and buy office buildings. So it's funny you mentioned that, Jason, but I'm opting against that, at least in the short term, just because there's still too much uncertainty in that space. But there will be a lot of pain, and I think it's pretty clear that office buildings are going to see the worst of the commercial real estate side because of all the uncertainty and the fear in that space. I think if people think that multifamily is not going to experience any pain, I think they're very, very misguided. There's still going to be a lot of pain in multifamily. Not as much as office, but a lot of pain anyway.
So you guys are considering to get into office sometimes?
Well, to me personally, it's something I've always liked. You know, I don't think I've sold the rest of the team on it yet, but I like the idea, and it's probably something I will push for a little bit in the next couple of months. You know, I do think there are some good opportunities out there in other asset classes too. You know, retail, you know, a lot of people say retail is a good buy right now. I mean, probably 2 years ago, retail was a great buy. So maybe that market's heating up a little bit because it already got beat up pretty good during the peak of the pandemic. You know, there's all different asset classes. So Christian's posting hotels. Christian, you got to speak up here. But so hotels, I mean, also got beat up pretty good during the peak of the pandemic. And the best deals that I saw in 2021 were hotel deals. Now, does that mean you won't find good hotel deals out there now? No, you probably will. You probably won't find great ones. The great ones were 2 years ago, but there's still good ones out there for sure. So every asset, whether it's real estate, whether it's soybeans, whether it's gold, whatever it might be, every asset in every market goes in cycles. And they're gonna have up cycles, they're gonna have down cycles. So once you understand that, and once you understand how the cycles work and how these things play out in practicality, what'll happen is you'll position yourself to take advantage of them. But again, that's gonna come from expertise and knowledge and skill, and that's gonna take time and effort. So, and for anybody in here, regardless of what you're investing in, I would tell you, you want to be, working to become very familiar with that asset class, with the asset classes that you're investing in, and, focus on that. Why doesn't Warren Buffett invest in technology? As he always says, he said, yeah, it's a great sector, people make a lot of money, but what the heck do I know about technology? I'm 90 years old.
Right.
So he invests in railroads, he invests in things that he knows. So figure out what it is that you know and what it is that you enjoy, and where you have a competitive advantage in the market, whether it's multifamily real estate, whether it's soybeans, whether it's whatever it might be, and use that advantage to capitalize on it and to make money for yourself.
So, Charles, question, at the syndicator, right? Like for the last, 5-6 years, all you have been doing is this multifamily. So how do you teach yourself, or how do you learn how to underwrite, let's say, office or retail?
It's a good question, Jason. I'm actually trying to figure that out myself. So what you'll see is most of the other asset classes don't have the amount of gurus that multifamily does, because I think a lot of them realize that's where the money is at this point. So you definitely have to learn it more conventionally. You're probably going to have to go out and find the mentor, or just kind of take some deals and start playing with them yourself. So for me personally, I'm fortunate that when I was in New York working for a commercial real estate investor, I had exposure to industrial and to office and retail. But the way that I look at deals for him is a lot different than I'd want to underwrite them professionally, just because it's a different ballgame. He was using his own, the guy I worked with was using his own money. And because of that, sometimes you're going to have a much simpler process. I wouldn't do anything this involved if I wasn't syndicating it. So I'd like to learn how to actually do it properly, just so you look better when you're putting it in front of, investors and people that you're raising money from. So I don't have a great answer to that yet, but I think let's keep in touch with that, and we'll figure it out, because I think there's definitely solutions out there, and it's just figuring out what the best approach is.
So now, would you consider a mixed-use building now?
Maybe. So my thought would be I'd probably be less likely to consider it for something I'm syndicating. And admittedly, part of the reason is that, it's just a little bit tougher to underwrite with the traditional setting like this, because, you're kind of using blended cap rates and different things that make it a little more complex. But, there's a lot of people who do them for sure. I think, as Christian will tell you, like even on the deals that come to my inbox with commercial spaces in there at this point, at the commercial and multifamily, I usually delete those and don't even look at them. So maybe down the line, but it's not something I would consider a high priority right now. So I'd rather stick with an individual asset class. Who else has questions, guys?
Charles,
Yes, Kim.
at what percentage below asking price would you turn in a LOI?
So my general rule of thumb right now is that from within 80% of the pricing guidance, I would submit the LOI. If it's less than that, I would definitely speak with the broker before submitting it. And even if I'm at like that 80-85% range, I may still speak with them. I might submit it anyway, but I may speak with them just to kind of put it out there. So about 2 weeks ago, there was a deal that had pricing guidance around 29 million. My LOI was at 25, so it was a little higher than 80% of it. And I was debating if I should have put the offer in, because I kind of felt it would be a pretty competitive deal at that price. So we wound up pretty low. There were a few groups that came pretty close to that 29 number, but it is what it is. You're not going to win them all anyway. So just submitting the LOI and staying active helps, because it shows brokers that you're a real buyer. You can look at 100 deals, but if you look at 100 deals and don't submit any LOIs, they consider you a looker and not a buyer.
All right. like on this deal, can we have like a hypothetical where like say 30 doors are burned and that the insurance, like will pay the loss rent and also the full renovation, and that the time period is like say 12 months. And so how would you integrate that scenario in a underwriting template?
Well, for the year one numbers, what I would do is I would probably base them off of 30 less units. So, if my average rent here is 993, instead of extrapolating that over 133 units, I would do it over 103. And then what I would do is in the P&L tab, if I'm expecting those units to be back online in year two, then I would start adding that value back in. Now, what you could have the insurance proceeds assigned to you, personally, I'm not a big fan of that, especially once the property sells. The insurance carrier is way less likely to want to pay the proceeds to somebody who's not their client. So I'd probably rather get a lower purchase price and tell the seller that they can keep the proceeds whenever the insurance carrier pays them. But that's just personal preference, because you could have a lot of complications once you assign the insurance claim.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The good news is we're hitting a point in the cycle where there's certainly a lot more room for negotiation than there was. There's a little negotiation now, but I think as you go a few months in and you're later in the year and you see the market in a much less favorable position, you'll certainly have a lot more room for negotiation. And in some cases, sellers that won't have anything to really counter with, because there'll be even less buyers, less liquidity, and they'll be in a position where they're stuck and they need to sell.
Would you say, Charles, that the 2 times during the year, like when things are most active are like, say, from like March to June, and then after June, kids are on vacation, family traveling, and then after summer vacation, say like what, August, September, October is a second wave?
Good question. You would think that, because that does make sense logically. The past couple of years, what I found is that from about mid to late January, so from the time you have NMHC, which is usually mid to late January, that's when you see the first round of deals start to come out. And then most times they're pretty consistent until about early November. So it doesn't die down as much as you expect during the summertime, but where it dies down is from early November to like mid-January. So there's about a 2.5 month lull. And the reason you see that is, quite frankly, a lot of these guys don't want to do as much during the holiday season. Not just the brokers, but the investors and the owners too. Brokers and investors are kind of focused on getting any of their deals at the end of the year closed, mainly for tax purposes. So that's usually a high priority. And then there's usually a little bit of a lull in the action for the early to better part of January until you have NMHC, and then things start blasting out left and right. But this year is a little bit more unusual. So I think things are going to be very different. It surprises me actually how many deals there are right now in the market. I knew there would be a lot in the first quarter. I kind of thought that was a last ditch effort for a lot of sellers trying to sell properties. But even though there's a lot of deals out there in the market, keep in mind there's a lot of deals that aren't getting done. So a lot of people are testing, they're not getting their price, and they're holding on to these deals. And for people that have cash, that's okay. For people that have good debt, that's okay. For people that have adjustable rate debt and they have no cash, they're just delaying the inevitable. So Annie's asking, why do you think there will be more distressed properties, more opportunities later this year and start of 2024? What's the trend looking like? What are the contributing factors, and how can we leverage best without being shark-like mafioso approach? Well, I'll start with the second question. I think you're probably going to need to be shark-like mafioso approach because a lot of these things are going to move fast. So with the opportunities that are going to be in trouble, those people aren't going to have a lot of time in most cases. Many of them will be too stubborn were quite frankly too stupid to realize that they're in trouble. And because of that, they're not going to have a lot of time by the time these deals need to move. So Christian, the deal that you looked at when I was away earlier this month, did you tell people the story behind that one?
Which deal is this, Charles?
Colonial Landing. So what happened with that?
Oh,
stuff?
yeah. Yeah, I think so this deal is one in Southern Virginia. It's a 92 unit. It's I think we've probably spoken about it before, but it's a deal we started to first look at probably a year and a half ago. We always kind of crack up about this deal, but basically we at this point the seller was looking for right around like 7 million, and we were coming in at like 6.1, and he basically said, you all are crazy, like there's absolutely no way, right? And the market still kind of heated up at the beginning of last year, right? But long story short, the guy, some of the units, like 12 of the units, end up burning down, right? I think he probably had an adjustable rate mortgage, and he started to get into a little bit of trouble. Fast forward a couple of months, and he actually ended up handing in the keys back to the bank because he was coming out of pocket every month, right? And so we kind of always laugh about it because, we almost got it at 6.1, and then our most recent offer, which we submitted like a month and a half ago to the bank, was at like 2.2 million or something. So definitely a big discount there.
So the reason I mention that is that's a stupid seller. Don't be a stupid seller for anybody who owns properties. So there's times you're going to take losses. It's better you take a small loss than to lose everything. Don't be foolish. There'll be a lot of foolish people, and that's where the opportunities are coming in. Because when you get to that point, when they've put their ego aside, when they've put their hopeful thinking aside, and they realize that, oh crap, I have a problem and I have about a month or two before I lose this property, you're going to need to be able to move fast. So there's not going to be a lot of time to go there and do a full marketing process. Brokers will bring these deals to a handful of buyers, and you're going to have to be ready to move. So the best thing I would tell you to position yourself to be ready for that is having access to cash. Even if it's not your cash, it's got to be somebody's cash, because you'll need to be able to move fast. Some of them you're not going to be able to get conventional financing for. You may even need to buy cash in some instances and then refinance. There's a reason that you see big companies out there raising all these rescue funds right now, because they're keeping piles and piles of cash. So that way, when these opportunities hit, they're going to absolutely go in there like sharks, and you need to be ready to do the same. So in terms of why there'll be more later this year and early 2024. So I don't think it's been a secret that there's going to be a lot of failures in the commercial real estate spaces and multifamily for sure. But the part that's kept everybody guessing is the when. And I think there's a lot of people that initially thought it would be earlier this year, myself included initially. So the bearishness is still coming. It's just taking longer than I expected, longer than a lot expected to play out. So where's the opportunity coming from? One, you have a lot of people with mortgages coming due, and their property valuations aren't there, so they're not going to be able to refinance. So if you can't refinance, what do you have to do? Well, one, you have to pay the mortgage off. So if you have an equivalent amount of cash to pay that mortgage off, then you're probably okay. Most people do not have that cash. So if you can't refinance and you don't have the cash to pay the mortgage, then you could potentially sell at a discount. Or you could do what this guy did and just give the keys back to the bank and walk away with absolutely nothing. So that's going to create opportunities, because some people are just hanging on by a thread, and they're hanging on because either the valuation's not there and their mortgage is coming due. Maybe they're underwater and the properties they have are losing money every month and they're having to come out of pocket for them, but maybe at some point they'll run out of cash. Maybe they're in a bridge loan and maybe they have a rate cap, and maybe they bought a rate cap for part of the term but not all of it. And now the cost to extend that cap is going to be astronomical. So, one example I've probably said in the session a few times, but just to reiterate for anybody who's never dealt with a rate cap. So, with these adjustable rate bridge loans, they'll let you buy a cap for part of the term with the understanding that you kind of extend it as needed. So with a lot of these bridge loans, they have 3-year terms. So what some people would do to save money at closing is they buy the cap for 2 years. One well-known operator who one of my friends invested with, he has a deal with a $28 million loan. They bought that deal in the summer of 2021, 3-year bridge loan. They took the cap out at closing for 2 years. 2 years, it cost them $27,000. Okay, so things were a lot cheaper 2 years ago for those caps. So now to extend it for the final year of the loan term, what's that cap going to cost?
1 point something.
That's right. Jason, you've heard this.
Over.
So 1.2 million. Okay. So that's a lot of money. And it's a lot of people who aren't going to have that money to come up with. So opportunities will definitely come. I think it's more a when than an if scenario, but they'll be flooding the market at some point. So
Out of curiosity, Charles, I know that you guys have a couple bridge loan deals right now. What are you guys doing with those bridge loan deals?
well, for me personally, I'm in 4 of them at this point. One was selling at a price that's pretty much going to break even. So even though we bought the property at 5.1, we're selling it at 6.6, pretty much breaking even because we had 4.4 in debt, we have 1.9 in equity, and by the point you pay a brokerage commission and closing costs, we've come out of pocket a bit to feed that deal, but we realized, what? It's better off just selling it and returning capital to people. I'd rather give them their principal back and just walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
A second one, our lender required us to escrow for the extension of the rate cap, which has been a very expensive escrow that we didn't have budgeted in, but at least it's good to have that money on the sidelines. So in that case, I worked out a deal with the lender where we got them to release some CapEx funds that we can use to purchase the extension of the rate cap earlier so it doesn't kill our cash flow. And then the other two that I'm in, to be determined. We have about 8 to 9 months before we need to buy those cap extensions, and we're probably going to have to come out of pocket for them, I would say.
Wow.
So if we can put those properties in a position to sell and break even, then that's a score. And when we bought those properties, they were all purchased in the first half of 2022. The cost bases, I think, were all pretty solid for where the market was at the time. But keep in mind, the market's changed a lot since then. And even though property values have a lot more to drop, they've also dropped a lot already. So just keep that in mind.
So for those other two jobs, that's to determine when to just put it in the market like now.
One of them we attempted to, unfortunately, it didn't work the way we would have liked it to. So we determined that being we have a few team members that are willing to chip in and keep it going, we're going to keep doing that. Thankfully, it helps to have people who are willing to do that because, if you don't have team members that are willing to come out of their pocket to do that, it can be very tough. And the second one, I do see at least a pretty good path forward. I think we're almost at a point where we can position ourselves to refinance. So the key is running up against the clock and trying to position ourselves to do that before we have to buy that rate cap extension.
How do you do that? How do you refinance at this point in time?
Well, we just have to keep pushing the NOI. So being that cap rates are a lot higher at this point and interest rates are a lot higher, valuations are naturally lower. So we just have to keep pushing the NOI to a point where we can get the refi and either not come out of pocket or come out of pocket minimally.
So you would do that by, let's say, pushing off repairs so that you can lower your expenses?
So I would say we kind of push anything we can. I mean, we're not trying to push every repair off, but I think anything that's not necessity, absolutely push anything that we can.
See, she's like, this is the kind of stuff that they don't teach you in real estate syndication school.
Right, that's real world experience. Tim, you have a question?
Yes, the situation that you shared, like where the group bought a rate cap for the first 2 years and not the third year.
Yep.
Did they know the price of the third year, or did they just not know about it?
Well,
What's the
they would definitely have known about it at closing, and truthfully, it's always clear in retrospect. I'm sure that they're probably kicking themselves saying, boy, I wish we would have bought that at closing. Because if it would have just been an extra $13,000, it would have been a lot better than 1.2 million.
okay, all right.
So, decisions are always clear in retrospect, I guess. But, unfortunately, they didn't do that, so that wasn't an option.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's really where the opportunities are coming from. It's a combination of those different factors, but in one way or another, it's coming down to people running out of money for deals that aren't performing. You have a lot of operators that are holding on to deals as long as they can. There'll certainly be some capital calls that are out there. There've been some already. A lot of well-known syndicators have forced distributions on different deals. A lot of syndicators have done capital calls on deals. So there's a lot of things that are going to be happening. I think people do, in most cases, what they can to keep these deals solvent. But even with that, there's going to be some that just aren't able to stay afloat. So that is exactly where the buying opportunity is. So later this year is when you'll start seeing a lot of these bridge loans mature. For people who were buying deals in 2020. Now, in 2020, they probably got a pretty good basis throughout most of that with the fear and the hysteria from the pandemic. In 2021, the basis probably weren't nearly as favorable. People were paying much higher prices by that point. And, because of that, a lot of those valuations won't be there. And a lot of those loans are going to start coming due later this year and early next year. So that's when you'll see some of these people in trouble that need to get out. Now, keep in mind, a lot of bridge loans do include extension options, but just because they include extensions doesn't mean the lender has to let you use it. If they don't feel that the loan's in good standing, if they don't feel that the debt service coverage ratio is there, they could deny your request to use that extension, even though it's built into the loan. Good. Do we have any other questions? We'll wrap up and wish everybody a happy Memorial Day weekend. We'll see everybody next Saturday, same time, same place.